What is a concept? The technical term concept refers to an idea or a notion or someone's understanding of something, whether it's a real thing or a totally imaginary thing. Now, some things to remember about concepts when we talk about concepts are that first, concepts exist only in the mind of the audience members. Concept doesn't refer to a real thing. It only refers to how one or more people understand that thing. Secondly, concepts are made of three parts: signs, properties, and reference. Again, these are technical terms, and we're going to use them in a very specialized way. And third, concepts change all the time, all through our lives. So remember those three things about concepts as we talk about them in this class. Remember, concepts are made up of signs, properties, and reference. Now, signs, the technical term signs, mean something very similar to what we think of when we think of the word signs. We see a sign and it sort of points to where we're going or points to something that we're looking for. The technical term signs also refers to things that exist outside the mind of the audience and point to concepts in the mind of the audience. A sign can be a word, it can be a picture, it can be a symbol. A sign can be a sound or a smell. Anything that reminds someone or a group of people of a concept. Different signs can point to different concepts in different minds. There will always be differences between one person and another in their concept of a thing, and there can be big differences between different groups of people and the concepts they have of a particular thing. Lastly, in the mind, a sign can also function as a referent. Now, this can get to be confusing, but it's also something important to remember. So as we go through this class, we're going to practice thinking about these things. If you feel like you're getting confused, that's actually a good sign. It's a sign that you're thinking about what we're talking about. So let's take a look at how signs work. When a person encounters a sign, it reminds them of a concept in their mind. Now, in this example, what we have is a symbol that looks sort of like the paw print of a dog, and a person who is familiar with what dogs' paw prints look like might be reminded of the concept of dog in their mind. The actual footprints of a dog in the sand might also remind a person of the concept of dog. Now, of course, this would depend on whether that person is familiar with the kinds of footprints that are left behind by dogs. So different people might have a different concept linked to this sign if they thought, well, maybe this is the paw print of a cat. A picture, even a picture of a fictional character, can remind someone of a concept. For example, a picture of the fictional character Snoopy might remind someone of the concept of dog. Now, the technical term referent refers to an example of a concept, but only an example as it exists in the mind of a particular person or a particular group of people. It's not the real-life example of the thing. It's an example as that person or group of people understands it. A referent can be a real example or a fictional one. For example, Snoopy is a fictional dog that some people are familiar with and some people are not familiar with. Some people are familiar with the cartoon character of Ren. Some people are familiar with the old movie character Lassie or Rin Tin Tin. There are lots of dogs that people know in real life. People have pets. People's neighbors have pets. They might only think of dogs as food, depending on what culture that they're from. Some people might be afraid of dogs. Snoopy's a good example because someone might look at a picture of Snoopy even though they've never heard of Snoopy, and it still might be a sign pointing to the concept of dog. And remember, a sign can also be a referent. A referent can serve as a sign. These are sort of dynamic and changing definitions of these technical terms. Let's take a look at some more examples. How this process works in our minds is we see a sign or we encounter a sign, And it not only reminds us of the general concept, but it usually reminds us of a particular example. In this example, the symbol for a dog's footprint might remind a person of the concept of dog in general, and it might remind them very specifically of the referent of the fictional character Snoopy. Different people will have different reference of a particular concept in their mind. They might be reminded of a particular dog that they live with at home or that their neighbor has. Some people like dogs. Some people are afraid of dogs. Maybe there are particular reference in the mind of that person, mean dogs that they've known, or maybe they were bitten by a dog. And that's going to change their concept of what a dog is. And that's why different people will have different reactions to a particular sign. This sign is sort of neutral. It doesn't say mean dog, doesn't say nice dog, but a person seeing this sign might be reminded of a concept of dog that's either positive or negative. Now, properties refers to the things that make the concept what it is. What makes a dog a dog? What makes justice justice? The normal use of the word definition sort of refers to the properties of the thing being defined. But definitions, as a technical term, exist outside the mind. But the list of properties of a concept that we're talking about, remember, they're only going to exist in the mind of an audience member or a group of people. Why is this important? When people argue about just about anything, they are very often arguing about the properties of a particular concept. Let's take a common example, abortion. Depending on an audience member's definition of person, what they think is or is not a person, the properties of a person, they might believe that abortion is murder. But again, what are the properties of murder? So when people argue about whether abortion is right or wrong, what they're usually arguing about is the definition of a person, definition of murder, and when we talk about definitions in this unit, we're talking about the properties, the thing that makes that concept what it is. And another thing to keep in mind is the properties in one person's mind almost always describe specific reference in the mind of that person or that group of people. When they're talking about the properties of a concept, they're not usually thinking abstractly like we are. They're usually thinking about the properties of particular reference or examples. So let's talk about the concept of dog and the properties. Dogs are furry, maybe. They have pointed ears, we could say. They leave distinctive footprints in the sand, and they tend to be friendly and affectionate, at least with people. Again, when people argue, they are very often arguing about the properties of a particular concept, and properties almost always describe specific reference in the mind of each audience member. So let's take a look at a couple of different reference and see how they match up with the list of properties we came up with that describe what makes a dog a dog. Let's take a look at Snoopy. He has fur. He makes distinctive tracks in the sand. He's friendly and affectionate, at least with most people. But does he really have pointed ears? Now, does this mean Snoopy is not a dog? That depends on the audience member that you are communicating with. If they don't see pointed ears, they might not realize Snoopy is a dog. For some people, a dog is a dog with fur and pointed ears making distinctive tracks in the sand, but they don't think of the dog as being friendly and affectionate with people. So for different people, the same concept will have some properties in common with the concepts in other people's minds and some properties that are different. This is also true of signs. Some people would recognize certain signs as always pointing to a dog, and some people might not recognize that sign as pointing to a dog. And once again, different people will have different reference, different examples of dog in their mind when they think of the concept of dog. We're doing this exercise for several different reasons. One of our expected learning outcomes in this class is to practice some metacognition, to think about our own thinking. It's also designed to help us think about our own reading. Why would we do that? Well, for one thing, it helps us achieve our goals as writers when we're trying to write in a way that gets the response we want from an intended audience. If we think about our own reading process and our own thinking process, it helps us think about understanding how other people read and think. More specific goals, when we write our final paper, when we discuss and try to disprove the article that we read for annotated bibliography, one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to argue about the definition of a key concept that is related to that topic. Now, your author of your article may have defined that key concept, and you can argue directly with that. The author may have assumed that the audience already understood a particular definition of that key concept, and you may have to sort of read between the lines and deduce what that concept was, and then you can argue with that. Don't worry about getting these definition of a concept essays perfect or even polished. There's no particular one right way to do this. We're going to read some examples of some essays where people have defined concepts. You can use those as models. I'm not very picky about how you do this essay. It's very challenging. This is a new and maybe confusing idea. I think it's worth attempting. I think it's good practice. And all I'm going to look for when I grade your essays is, did you use several different signs? And think of that as using different words for the same thing, just different vocabulary words. Those can be different signs. Did you list some properties? Did you describe what makes the thing, what makes that concept what it is? And did you give some examples, some reference? Give me your definition of this concept, and then later on you can think about how your definition of the concept might be different from other people's definitions of the concept.